Change is one of the most misunderstood experiences and processes in adult life. I have worked with thousands of people who say they want to change, but feel frozen when it comes time to actually move forward. Not because they're incapable, not because they're lazy, but because they don't understand how change really works. Most of us were never taught how to change in healthy, sustainable ways. Instead, we learned that change is something that happens to us, not something we actively participate in. So we associate change with crisis and loss and upheaval and failure. When we feel the quiet nudge that something needs to shift, we often ignore it until life forces our hand. Maybe you recognize yourself here. You feel like there has to be more to life than what you're living, but nothing is technically wrong. You've done what you're supposed to do. You've achieved what you were told would make you happy, and yet something still feels off. And that internal dissonance is not a problem. It's an invitation. But for people pleasers and perfectionists, this invitation can feel terrifying because change threatens the identities we've built around being dependable and capable and needed. And it asks us to question patterns that once kept us safe, but are now keeping us stuck. I know this intimately. There was a time in my life when everything looked successful on the outside. I had a high-profile career, a marriage, recognition, responsibility, and yet I had completely abandoned myself. I didn't know what I wanted because I'd spent decades focused on what everyone else needed from me. And it took the collapse of my marriage and the grief that followed to wake me up. Not because pain is required to change, but because pain is what often finally gets our attention. But here's the deal. We don't have to wait for a crisis to make change. We get to rock our own foundation before it rocks us. What I learned on my own reinvention journey and what I teach and coach is that change does not have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be chaotic. And it certainly doesn't have to be accidental. Change is a process. Change is a skill. It's a framework you can learn. And once you understand this, everything can begin to shift. Because here's what most people don't realize. You have been in the process of changing your entire life. You've adapted, you've evolved, you've navigated transitions and losses, relocations, new jobs, new relationships. The problem isn't that you can't change. The problem is that you've been changing reactively in response to external circumstances, instead of proactively in alignment with your internal truth. That's a completely different kind of change. That's reinvention. So the first myth we're going to bust is, I have to wait for change to happen to me. This is one of the most common beliefs I hear. I'll change when something happens. When I have more time, when the kids are older, when work slows down, when I feel more confident. But here's the truth. Waiting is not neutral. Waiting is a choice, and it's usually a choice that keeps you exactly where you are. The idea that change requires perfect timing is a myth. There will never be a moment when everything lines up neatly and fear disappears. If you're waiting for certainty, you'll wait forever. Change doesn't begin with confidence. Confidence is a byproduct of action. Think about any time you've learned something new, a language, an instrument, a sport, a skill. You didn't feel confident at first and then start practicing. You started practicing, fumbling, making mistakes, and confidence built over time through repetition and experience. It's the same with life change. You don't wait until you feel ready. You start before you're ready, and readiness develops through the doing. With the right tools and a proven framework, you can initiate change whenever you want. even if you feel scared, uncertain, overwhelmed. In fact, especially when you don't feel ready. This is why structured support matters so much. When you have a framework to follow and when you have guidance, when you're not trying to figure it out all alone, change becomes less overwhelming. But here's the deal. You don't need the stars to align. You don't need permission, and you don't need to hit rock bottom. You just need to decide that your life matters enough to engage with it intentionally. And here's something else. Waiting often looks like preparation, but it's usually avoidance. We tell ourselves we're not ready yet, when what we really mean is, I'm scared. And that is okay. Fear is natural. Fear is human. But fear doesn't get to make your decisions for you. You can be afraid and still move forward. You can be uncertain and still take the next step. You can feel unprepared and still begin. Because the truth is, you're never going to feel completely ready. And if you wait for that feeling, you'll be waiting your entire life. Myth number 2, change is selfish. I should be happy with what I have. This myth runs especially deep for people pleasers. We've been taught that wanting more means we're ungrateful, that honoring our desires will disappoint someone else, that staying the same is a form of loyalty. But here's the truth. Suppressing your desires doesn't make you generous. It makes you resentful. You are worthy of your desires, full stop. The more your life is aligned with what you actually want, the more present and available you become in your relationships. When you stop abandoning yourself, you stop asking others to fill the emptiness that comes from living out of alignment. Pursuing your desires is not selfish. It's honest. And honesty is the foundation of real connection. When you choose a life that feels true to you, you don't just change your own experience, you model possibility for others. You give silent permission for the people around you to stop settling and start listening to themselves. Said another way, when you change, you give others permission to do the same. I see this all the time in my work. Someone finally sets a boundary with their family, and suddenly their sibling starts setting boundaries too. Someone leaves a soul-draining job, and their partner starts questioning whether they're in the right career. Someone stops performing gratitude and starts being honest about what they want, and it creates a ripple effect because people are watching. Not because they're judging you, but because they're hungry for examples of what's possible. Gratitude and desire can coexist. Appreciation does not require stagnation, and honoring yourself does not require abandoning others. In fact, I'd argue that the most loving thing you can do for the people in your life is stop pretending. Stop performing a version of you that isn't real. Stop sacrificing your truth on the altar of everyone else's comfort. Because when you show up authentically, when you stop hiding your desires, when you stop hiding your needs and your humanity, you create space for real intimacy. Not performance of connection, but real connection. And that's what we all want, right? Not to be loved for who we're pretending to be, but to be loved for who we actually are. And then the third myth I will bust here is that I need the approval of others before I change. This myth keeps more people stuck than almost anything else. We wait for someone to validate our feelings, to reassure us that we're making the right choice, to tell us it's okay to want something different. But here's the truth. No one lives inside your body but you. No one else hears your internal dialogue. No one else carries your unfulfilled desires. You do not need permission to change. When you reconnect with your internal truth, with what feels right for you, clarity begins to emerge naturally. And while others may have opinions, Those opinions do not get to outrank your lived experience. One of the most powerful shifts I see in my work is when people stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I know to be true? That's when change becomes easier. That's when change becomes crystal clear because you don't need approval. You need self-trust. And self-trust is something you build step by step. Every time you honor what you know to be true, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disappoints someone, even when it goes against what you should do, you build evidence. Evidence that you can trust yourself. Evidence that your knowing matters. Evidence that you're capable of making decisions that serve your highest good. And over time, that evidence accumulates until one day you realize you don't need external validation anymore because you've become your own authority. Now, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean you ignore everyone else's input or become an isolated island. It just means you stop outsourcing your sense of rightness to other people. You can listen to advice, you can consider perspectives, you can take input, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with your choices. And only you know what feels true in your body, in your soul, in your lived experience. So the question isn't, will they approve? The question is, does this align with who I'm becoming? And that's a question only you can answer. Before we continue, I want to share something with you. If what we've been talking about today resonates, if you're feeling the pull toward change but don't know where to begin, I have an invitation for you. Join me for my Reinvent Yourself 4-day virtual experience designed specifically for people pleasers and perfectionists who are ready to stop living on autopilot and start creating the life they actually want. Over 4 days, we'll work through a proven framework that thousands have used to make real, lasting change. On day 1, you will define and clarify your vision like never before. On day 2, you'll learn to create boundaries that protect your time and energy without guilt. On day 3, you'll take action through the power of micro actions. No more overthinking and no more waiting. And on day 4, you'll build momentum so you can sustain this transformation beyond our time together. We're going to meet on February 18th through the 21st, just 45 minutes a day. You will get live sessions with me, you'll get a workbook, you'll get a supportive private community, and replays available for a limited time. If you want lifetime access to the replays, plus 4 additional VIP coaching sessions for your personalized guidance, you can also upgrade your experience. This is your opportunity to say yes to possibility. Go to nancylevin.com/reinvent to register. Again, nancylevin.com/reinvent. I truly hope to see you there. Okay, let's dive back in and talk about how change actually happens, because understanding the process makes it so much less intimidating. Over the years, I've refined a framework that supports sustainable reinvention, not quick fixes or motivational highs, but real integrated transformation. And I'm going to walk you through it briefly right here, but we're going to go deep in depth in Reinvent Yourself. And this is my transformation equation. Change equals vision plus choice plus action. So you've got to define your vision. You can't move forward until you know what you're moving toward. So we start by clarifying what you want your life to look and feel like, not based on expectation, but based on what you think and what you want. What actually lights you up, what actually matters to you, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And just as importantly, we identify the fears and beliefs that have been running the show beneath your awareness. We look at the old, outdated promises that are keeping you stuck, even when you want to make change, because you can't shift what you can't see. And once you bring these unconscious patterns to light, you can begin releasing them and choosing something different. Next, we look at boundaries. You have a choice. Every time you say yes, when you want to say no, you give your power away. Boundaries help you reclaim agency without guilt, learning to honor your limits, learning to communicate your needs, learning to stop abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. And for people pleasers, this is often the hardest and most transformative work because you've been taught that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's, that saying no makes you difficult, selfish, or ungrateful. But the truth is, boundaries are what make sustainable relationships possible. Without boundaries, you build resentment. And with boundaries, you build self-respect. Then we're going to be looking at action because change doesn't happen through insight alone. It happens through action, small, doable, aligned action. And this is where micro actions come in. You learn how to stop overthinking and start moving, how to take imperfect action instead of waiting for the perfect plan, how to build momentum through consistent small steps rather than sporadic big leaps. Because the truth is, most people don't need more information. They need implementation support. They need to know what to do next, and then next, and then next. And that's what I'm here to show you. Then we look at the clear path forward that doesn't require you to overhaul your entire life overnight. Movement creates possibility. Movement creates momentum because reinvention is not a one-time event. It is a way of life. We anchor everything you've been learning into a clear, sustainable plan so you leave knowing exactly what to do next. This is about creating systems that support your new way of being, about identifying what might try to pull you back into old patterns and having strategies ready, about building a practice of continuous calibration so you can keep adjusting as you grow. This framework works because it meets you where you are and supports you in becoming who you're ready to be. It's not about willpower. It's not about perfection. It's not about discipline. It's not about doing it right, and it's not about doing it alone. It's about having a proven structure, compassionate guidance, and a community of people doing the work alongside of you. That changes everything. So I want to remind you about what's possible. Sometimes we need to hear that transformation isn't theoretical, that it's real and it's available to you. Sandy came into this work anxious, depressed, struggling with her relationship to food and alcohol and herself. She describes her reinvention as life-changing, not because everything became perfect, but because she came home to herself. Today she says, I love my life. I love me. Not I'm working on loving myself. Not I'm trying to be okay with who I am, but I love me. Because that's what's possible when you stop abandoning yourself and start choosing yourself. And then there's Claudia. She was living on autopilot, doing all the right things without listening to herself. She realized she was missing from her own life. And now she meets challenges grounded and self-led. Her words, my life isn't leading me. I get to lead my own life. Think about that shift from being swept along by circumstances and expectations by everyone else's needs to being the conscious creator of your own experience. That's no small thing. And then take Jeff. He was burnt out and exhausted. He thought time off would fix it, but it didn't. Learning how to set boundaries and honoring his needs did. He calls himself a boundary badass now and says the gift on the other side of this work is freedom. Freedom to say no, freedom to choose, freedom to honor what's true without guilt. And these are not rare outcomes. They're what happens when people stop waiting and start choosing themselves. And if you feel that pull toward change, even if you can't fully articulate it yet, that is enough to begin. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to know every step of the path. You just need to know that staying where you are isn't working anymore. And that's enough. That discomfort, that restlessness, that quiet voice saying there has to be more than this, that is your invitation. So if you are ready to stop waiting and start changing consciously, intentionally, and with support, I invite you to join me for Reinvent Yourself at nancylevin.com/reinvent. We start on February 18th, 4 days, a proven framework, a community of people ready to choose themselves and the guidance you need to make real change. You will walk away with clarity about what you want next, boundaries that protect what matters, action steps you can actually implement, and momentum to carry you forward. This is not about motivation. It is about transformation, real sustainable change that doesn't require you hit rock bottom or wait for perfect timing. Register now at nancylevin.com/reinvent. Because here's what I know. You're not stuck because you can't change. You're stuck because you haven't had the right framework, the right support, and the right permission. But you have it now. The question is, are you ready to use it? Your life is waiting for you to step in and lead it. Not someday, but today.